Hello and welcome to Cloud Speed by Deloitte. In this regular podcast series, we'll delve into the world of cloud, answering some of those tricky questions, getting to grips with all that cloud has to offer, and keeping you up to speed on recent developments. So let's begin, shall we? Here is your host, Arti Balakrishnan.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Series 2 of Cloud Speed by Deloitte. I'm Arti Balakrishnan, a director in our cloud engineering practice, and I'll be your host for this episode. In Series 1, we introduced and explored the subject of cloud fluency, getting to grips with the basics of cloud. For Series 2, we thought we'd delve into some of the more inspirational use cases, demonstrating how cloud can help businesses solve critical problems, drive innovation, and transformation across their organizations. We're really excited by the lineup of topics we have for you. They range from climate change to diversity. If there is a particular topic that you want us to explore, please get in touch with us and we'd love to hear from you. So to kickstart this series, we're going to be asking the question, how has cloud changed the digital contact center? And what does this mean for customer service experience? To provide you with our thoughts on this topic, I'm delighted to be joined by my colleagues, Richard Small, Kishan Patni, and Elliott Chaffel, who are our resident experts in this field. I'm sure that this introduction doesn't do you justice, so I'll let you introduce yourselves. Richard, you first.
Thanks, Arti. Hi, everybody. I'm Richard. I'm a partner in Deloitte Digital, working for retail and consumer clients. I'm actually in my heart a customer service specialist, so that's really what I do for a living. And I'm honoured to lead our European Cloud Contact Centre practice.
Thank you, Richard. Elliott?
Thanks, Arti. I'm Elliott Chaffel. I'm a senior manager inside our cloud engineering practice, and I am currently the contact center lead architect for a lot of these cloud-based contact center solutions that we're delivering to our clients.
Thank you. And Kishan?
Thanks very much. I lead our artificial intelligence studio, which, as the name suggests, focuses on using the latest artificial intelligence technologies to solve a range of problems across different sectors. Given the broad applicability of AI in customer service and the contact center, we often find ourselves doing quite a bit to introduce different AI solutions into businesses' call centers.
Thanks, everyone, for the introductions. We certainly have the right people in this room for this podcast. Let's get straight to it. How has cloud changed, or rather transformed, the digital contact center experience? And I'm keen to hear all of your thoughts, but I'll start off with Richard first.
Oh, thanks, Arti. Well, I suppose if I focus on the business changes that have really been enabled by cloud, three things really. The things we've been able to do with self-service and artificial intelligence that Kishan was just talking about. There are things we could do now that we just couldn't do 5 years ago, creating brilliant conversational self-service for our clients and their customers. So that's kind of new tech, and it's getting better all the time. I suppose the second thing is that the flexibility and agility with which businesses are able to move, so the time to market, their ability to create new ways of working with the cloud has been really remarkable. So we can create things in days that used to take us weeks or months. And really the third thing is the analytics and the sort of the feedback we can get from social, from sentiment, from speech analytics and things like that, which just allow us to operationally get better every day.
That's really insightful, Richard. Elliott, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this from a technical perspective.
Yeah, sure. So building on sort of what Richard's already mentioned, there's quite a few interesting technical aspects to the cloud contact center experience. So the first of them is the agility that comes with the cloud. So as Richard sort of alluded to, where things used to take months, they now take minutes or days. And it also doesn't stop there. So you also have the ability to expand and scale out as demand increases, as well as scaling back in when there isn't as much demand. This also has quite a direct impact on the cost. So because you're using cloud-based infrastructure, you use the consumption cost models for the most part. So you don't have any fixed hardware. There's no sort of infrastructure required locally so much anymore. And you just pay for what you use. So if you have 1,000 calls, you pay for 1,000 calls. If you have 10,000, you pay for 10,000. One of the other really big technical sort of advancements from a cloud-based contact center is the ecosystem of the cloud. So whereas telephony and contact center technology used to be very sort of focused, single purpose, you now have access to this huge ecosystem of things which enable you to do really deep integrations to other products or other vendors, as well as the ability to offer in new channels that you may not have had before. So instead of just voice, you now have voice, chat, social media like Twitter or Facebook, SMS, WhatsApp, and even sort of face-to-face video as well. So yeah, really exciting in terms of how it's grown from that perspective.
Thanks, Elliott, and thanks, Richard. That's a very interesting answer in that it opens up access to new technology, improves speed of delivery, and enables end-to-end integration with other solutions, thereby driving a better experience for customers. Picking up on integration specifically, how do our partners and the wider ecosystem come into play with that? Richard, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, well, the most important integrations usually for me are all around customer data and workflows and process automation, but mostly the advisor desktop. So the environment that colleagues in the contact center or middle office and back office, how good that is for them and how that makes them as efficient and effective as possible. So partners like Salesforce and ServiceNow and others, creating those sort of 360 views of the customer and helping us to automate as much as we can of the process and provide the right information at the right times. Really tightly integrated with the cloud partners for the contact center platforms like Amazon Connect, Salesforce Service Cloud Voice, Google, which I know Elliott will talk about in a minute. But allowing those workspaces to become really, really high quality actually drives adoption. So a happy advisor normally drives happy customers, we know that, but a happy advisor is also an efficient advisor. So the more we can focus down on making that workspace work and having all of the processes really well integrated end to end makes a massive difference.
And from an AI perspective, much of the integration ability that cloud offers has really fueled a broader ecosystem that makes now a better time than ever to start to bring AI into the contact center in many ways. What we've seen is, of course, the various cloud platforms creating different components that leverage AI that can be very quickly adopted by organizations and their internal tech teams. What we've also seen is the rise of a number of vendors that essentially sit on top of a multitude of cloud providers and aim to orchestrate the different underlying building blocks to make it easier for businesses to bring it all together in a way that suits them. For example, one of our chatbot partners, a company called Humley, has often sat on top of many of the cloud platforms. And what that enables is for a business to set up a chatbot, and depending on what performs best, whether it's the voice transcription engine of Google or the text recognition of Amazon, they have the flexibility to switch between what is most appropriate for the task at hand with total flexibility. And that is great from a initial setup point of view, an ongoing management point of view, and overall makes it much easier for businesses to start to introduce AI across various parts of the customer journey.
Thanks, Richard and Kishan, for the prompt to think beyond platform providers to a holistic, integrated ecosystem of partners that you need to work with to get this right. But building on that topic, does this application and of experience extend beyond retail customers to operations and corporate customers as well?
Elliott, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So definitely, I think is the short answer for that. So I can actually give a few sort of examples. So we ourselves, as Deloitte, use cloud-based contact center technology quite heavily. We use it as part of our managed services capabilities, both technically and on behalf of some of our clients. And what that means is that we have the ability to stand these new contact centers up for a long time, a short period of time. It doesn't really matter what it's for, but we have repeatable solutions that we can go over and over and over again to make sure that we're delivering that value quickly and securely. It's also interesting to know that it's not just retail customers that can benefit from this sort of thing. I've recently been doing quite a lot of work with people inside the financial services industry. And we've been using some of the cloud-based technology to actually speed up certain things. So recently worked with a company that had just gone through a merger and an acquisition. And the speed at which we could redeploy their contact center capability while all the other items are ongoing was a huge win for them. And also, it's providing some new channels and new interesting things for some of the situations that we're in at the moment with COVID and other things. So we have the ability to work from home. We have the introduction of AI and chatbots and things like that, which can act as a bit of deflection. But also those new channels like SMS and things like that actually enable us to take some of those difficult conversations and make sure that we can take them over time, because contact centers are overloaded with certain things, like particularly in the travel industry, for example.
And Kishan, you've seen quite a few of these kinds of challenges outside of retail and consumer, haven't you?
Absolutely. And to build on the point Elliott mentioned there around the rise of chatbots, it's really interesting to see how that's evolved over the last few years and how it's evolved in tandem with the rise of cloud and its associated technologies. I think at the outset, I'd say around late 2016 to early 2017, when there was first some resurgent interest in artificial intelligence, from a customer experience point of view, people immediately started to look at chatbots. What we've seen over the last few years, though, is that start to become a bit more holistic. And if we take a step back and think about how AI generally tends to bring value to organizations, it's helpful to think about it in three ways. There's usually benefit that comes through getting insights from large amounts of data, or there's benefit coming from automating certain processes or decisions, or finally, there's benefit that comes from using AI to streamline certain interactions, and that's where the chatbots come in. If we look at the contact center space in particular, it's arguably one of the most well-placed parts of any organization to tap into the benefits of all three of those different angles to AI. Because of course, you can have a chatbot that speaks to customers or even internal users, but then that is also creating a bunch of data that you can then mine to better inform how your overall process and customer experience needs to evolve as time goes by. And equally, you can then start to also appropriately automate certain actions and really get to the core crux of self-service. And thinking about things at that really generic level, that's something that can apply to technologies that face external customers as well as your internal users. So we've seen chatbots get used for customer service that have also then been retrained and redeployed for internal help desks, for example, to finance departments or HR departments. So the overall paradigm is the same and the challenges are very similar. And we're definitely seeing more and more organizations starting off on one side, whether that's internal or external, but then looking to reapply those learnings and those technologies all over the place.
Thank you, Kishan, and thank you, Elliott. Some great examples there. I'm specifically taking away the 3 points that you highlighted, Kishan, around any scenario that needs insight from data, automation, and streamlining interactions should always consider using these technologies. And anything that requires you to deliver at speed, integrate with other technologies are good applications, be it internal or external. So thank you for that. But when and why should we consider changing contact center solutions? Most organizations end up having some form of it already. Richard, do you want to take this one?
Well, yeah, there's lots of reasons why, or kind of points of entry into cloud contact center, but some of the most common are actually that the legacy infrastructure is becoming really expensive and irritating and slow to change. And actually that there's a sort of technical debt building up such that people have been wanting to do automation or supporting their advisors or their colleagues in better ways, and they just can't because the technology wasn't capable of doing that. So there's the kind of natural replacement cycle that says we can't do it with this, we need to actually go and look for something else. We see a lot of that. Cost, as Elliott pointed out, is a big one as well. We've looked at cloud replacements for legacy infrastructure and found orders of magnitude in terms of cost reduction. But most importantly, this idea of a kind of a unit cost-based, subscription-based service. So, if you use it, you pay for it. If you don't use it, in principle, you don't pay for it. And so we've seen in many cases that a replacement cloud infrastructure, because of its commercial packaging and because of the nature of cloud, can often be an order of magnitude cheaper than the legacy infrastructure. That does make a difference because quite often it allows our clients to fund projects that they weren't able to do before. So they know they can save money this year with cloud, and they can spend it on AI, or they can spend it on new ways of working, or they can spend it on new channels. So there's quite a virtuous circle from a cost perspective. But I suppose the other part is that we see people implementing these technologies for other reasons as well. So it may be that their organization is changing. It may be that COVID is driving some new way of working, like remote or virtualization. But we're also seeing quite a lot of crowdsourcing. We're seeing monolithic contact centers breaking up into smaller, more local centers. And to do that with legacy infrastructure is really difficult and expensive. So that often triggers a replacement cycle. And if you're buying today, you would buy cloud.
Thanks, Richard. I have a follow-on question on that. Considering the speed with which you can deliver these technologies and the barrier to entry is pretty low, does it get stood up right? And do people overcome the challenges in terms of process, behaviors, culture that is typically the underlying problem as well when they stand up these new technologies?
Well, I'll let Elliott talk about standing up the technologies because that's what he does for a living. But in terms of the behavioral change, ways of working, the transformation of the business to exploit the new technology, then that's something we get a lot from our clients to say, okay, we're thinking about changing our fundamental infrastructure, but we need your help to help us adopt or design new ways of working and new customer experiences. So it is absolutely true to say that a proper design is what's required to make something like this really work. But what often happens is that clients are implementing and changing their business rapidly for a reason, and that after that first wave is complete, we quite often then start to see the real benefits delivered by behavioral and operating model change.
Building on Richard's points there, where he mentions the stand-up, also to that sort of earlier point around a proof of concept or proof of value, that's really important for setting the right foundations for this sort of work. When you go through that proof of concept process or proof of value process, you're really making sure that you've got the fundamental building blocks to expand. So doing those well and doing those right means that you've got a nice modular contact center basis. You can test it on certain channels or certain options, and normally you really quickly start to see the value from that. So that's the key to getting that right, Arti, to your question.
Thank you. Excellent answers. But in our experience of having gone through this a few times across multiple clients, what do we see going well, and what are the hardest bits to get this right?
Hardest bits to get right, my view, are first of all the design. So understanding what the customers and the people that support them, the colleagues, are going to need, what that customer experience needs to be, what the key journeys and moments of magic are in customer experience. So what services are we offering? How do we offer them? What are our different kind of shop fronts on each of the channels, from online to voice to chat, etc. So that design's a really, really important part. It's the most important part to get right. But the second thing that I've seen, and it's something I'll pass over to Elliott on, really is actually the demand model, the cost model, all of that, sort of those parameters that then allow us to work out how to deploy Kishan's, automated services and human resources against that need. But also, ultimately, how much is it going to cost?
Yep. So I'll take that and build on that a little bit. So with the points Richard's mentioned around there, around things like the cost and how to distribute work, one of the fundamental things to do well in a contact center is routing. So it doesn't matter what channel it's coming on, if it's a voice call, if it's a chat, it needs to be going to the right person at the right time. Sometimes what we've seen go well and go badly is a little bit of attitude as well. So you have to make sure that the customer or client wants to make sure they are reimagining and making the very best of what they can do in their options, in their flows, and how it all sort of skims through the end-to-end flow of a call or an interaction between a client and a customer. To build on that again, I'll give you a little example from a financial services institution that I was working with. We did some call analysis with them, and we found out that over 70% of their calls were essentially just checking the balance on their cards and trying to work out how they could get a PIN reset done. So a huge number of the actual contact center colleagues or operatives were taking these calls, fielding them, and just doing the same thing over and over again, which is both a little bit demoralizing for them as well as not particularly interesting. So as part of that, we actually did a little bit of tweaking and sort of integrated some of that automation and bot type knowledge so that they could do that through self-service. And what I'll probably do is probably hand over to Kishan here, because I think he's got some really good insights into how that works and how that sort of crossover happens.
Thanks, Elliott. I was just about to dive in there. I really like the point you made there about routing. Something we've seen time and time again, and actually I'm surprised just how often it seems to come up, is the usage of AI and the so-called need for AI just to do that one simple task, to listen to a customer or to read what they've sent to you and simply assign a label to it so it gets forwarded on to the right person. And that's often, I like to think of that as the use case that is the so-called gateway use case to introduce AI and automation into the contact center, because it obviously brings benefits and it starts to layer in a certain degree of automation into the overall process. But from an organizational perspective, it's also a relatively straightforward use case to start to get used to what it takes to actually build something that effectively uses AI techniques. Now, where we've seen that go well is generally around a couple of core principles. One is certainly around scoping and prioritization. Going back to my comments earlier on in this session, I talked a bit about how when it comes to contact center processes, there are so many different things you can do with AI, and arguably every single one of those things should be done. Figuring out where to start can often be a challenge, but even once you've figured that out, to develop a so-called proof of concept or MVP of an AI solution requires a bit more structured thinking in order to get a reasonable outcome in a short amount of time. And where we see AI adoption in this space go really well is when that thinking has been done in an appropriate way. To bring that to life with an example, a few times we've worked with clients around the adoption of chatbots into the customer service space has resulted in conversations such as, where should the chatbot focus? I have a customer base that is speaking to me about any one of 100 different topics. I can't get my bot to appropriately handle every single one of those topics right now, but where should I start? And naturally, there's many different ways to skin that cat. But going back to my earlier point, the more you can start to impose a certain structure and a certain set of objectives around how you pick where you start, it overall sets you up for success in a much better way and generally leads to good outcomes.
So something that's also been really interesting in the project lifecycle is how our clients operationalize both parts of this. So, I mean, it's a new thing to operationalize AI and chatbots and automated support, but outside of that, there are some new tools and techniques in operationalizing the contact center. So we know we can support the advisors better with serving up knowledge and that kind of thing and making their lives easier. But we also have to focus on how to get them to adopt new channels and new ways of working. So focusing in on that and using the tools we've got around next best action, around understanding and prompting and nudging people to do particular things makes a huge difference as to how quickly the new ways of working could be adopted. But that's in the contact center. If we think about operationalizing the actual infrastructure itself, then you've got a whole bunch of new tools that you've got to start to work out how to run. And we've seen clients actually struggle a little bit with this. And a couple of times we've had to step in, or we've been asked to step in and help. But fundamentally, it's about building new skills and new ways of working in the IT organization, such that the time to market, the change cycles, the pace of change that Elliott was talking about, is possible. Because most IT organizations do work on weeks and months when, contact centers actually need to react sometimes within minutes or hours. So, but building the skills to be able to do that and the working practices and the relationships with the business leaders is a really important new kind of competence. And we do a lot of knowledge transfer and skills building, but it's still something to do.
That's brilliant. So in summary, think beyond the initial setup, which is the easy bit. Consider your routing carefully, apply AI where relevant, and operationalize so you can continue to sustain the service. With the collective experience we've got in this room of over half a century on cloud and contact center, I'm sure we can carry on for a while, but we will need to call this episode to a close here. Thank you so much, Richard.
It was a pleasure, Arti. Thank you.
Thanks, Kishan.
It's been great. Thanks very much for having me.
And thank you very much, Elliott.
Thanks very much.
So that brings us to the end of today's episode. We hope you've enjoyed listening. And if so, please share with your colleagues and friends who you think will enjoy it too. In the meantime, I'm Arti Balakrishnan, and you've been listening to Cloud Speed by Deloitte. Thank you very much.